Private Label Newsroom with your hosts, Karen and Neil Gorsman of the Private Label University and Susie Hickson of the Private Label Law Boutique, the only show that dares to unlock the secrets inside the latest news scoops about private label products and brands. With a combined 75 years experience in sourcing, importing, private labeling, retail, and law, the truth is about to be heard. Let's welcome your hosts, the fabulous, lovable powerhouse, Karen, Neil, and Susie.
All right, well, welcome to the Private Label Newsroom. We are so excited that you guys are here because today we're going to talk about retailers and how they are feeling so threatened about the competition and what Arbitrage is doing to brands on Amazon and online. So let's first talk about what Arbitrage is.
So Arbitrage really is taking a product, buying a product, reselling it, and making a profit. That's the down and dirty terms of arbitrage. So
basically you're finding a product that already exists, a brand that already exists, and you're purchasing it, whether it's from a distributor or a wholesaler, or you're going into a brick and mortar and it's on sale, and you're purchasing it at a lower price, at a lower cost, and then you're flipping it. You're selling it elsewhere for a higher cost, and then you're making profit from that. Now, this is something that Neil and I have been doing for many, many years. That's not where our bread and butter is. As you know, we private label. That's our specialty, and been private labeling for the last 3 decades, and have personally private labeled over 800 brands. However, these brands sometimes get resold at a discounted price and then sold online or in retail stores as arbitrage, as we mentioned. You buy it at a lower price and you sell it for a higher price. And the reason we want to talk about this today, especially with Susie, because she's going to bring in the do's and don'ts on the legal side of that, but we want to talk about what has been happening with retailers. So retailers, meaning retail brick and mortars, retail onliners, whether you're selling online or in a store, when you're dealing with other people's brands, for example, then what happens is there's a lot of competition going on with reselling other people's brands and trying to compete with costs and price. And so what we have found is so many retailers are so threatened by arbitrage, even though they may be doing it themselves. So they find that there has been an issue, and what we want to share with you today is literally right out of the news, right out of actually Neil's inbox, with an email that he had just received yesterday. So let's share with them what that means so that we can then kind of understand at whole what these retailers are concerned about, and then how we can kind of dive in on a private label side and also on a legal private label side to see how we can help everyone listening today so that they're not affected by this.
Mm-hmm. And with retailers, well, they must understand that even when they're buying from a distributor or wholesaler, that company is actually retailing. Even though they're called wholesalers and distributing, they're buying other companies' products and they're retailing it to retailers. So again, they're doing arbitrage as well. And I happened to receive an email from a wholesaler/retailer who said he's just tired of it. He's tired of playing whack-a-mole, trying to chase down all the retailers and sellers, just mass sellers online, who are selling either name brand products or his products.
And then having to compete with them because there's these price wars going on. I mean, Susie, you see that all the time, right? With a lot of your clients, with all these price wars, and I'm sure they come to you and say, like, how can they be competing? I buy it for this price. There's no way they can keep it that low, and then they're fighting for buy boxes and they're fighting for the competition. And that's kind of the email that you had come up with. It was an email. Why don't you share what that email actually said?
Well, basically, the email was saying how it's impossible to police the marketplace and they're tired of playing the game of whack-a-mole. Every time they try to shut down a reseller, another one would pop up in its place. And to make matters worse, the anonymity of the sales channel of people that are working in the shadows, it's impossible to identify even the worst offenders. So it basically, the problem is when retailers are selling even to a consumer. Someone walks into a store, they buy a product, they go to a distributor, they buy it in bulk, they sell it. They don't know where that product is being sold. So it can be sold in a number of different platforms, and then that distributor retailer really can't track down how it's being sold and the pricing, and they have no way of controlling that.
So then it becomes kind of like that stock market and that competition of, who's going to have the lower price. It keeps going lower and lower and lower and lower. And although there is map pricing, it seems to be like the Wild West when you get onto online platforms. So what's your thought of that, Susie? I mean, is there any legality there? Like, can someone, stop that? Like these price wars?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of gray area here, especially when you're dealing with products like this, because a lot of them are considered gray market goods, right? They're not being, they get out of the typical or mandated channels of trade. And when I say mandated, that would be by the owner of the brand who would say, this is how the product needs to be distributed. Unfortunately, when these distribution agreements have been entered into, a lot of times they were entered into in such a way that there was not really that thought process that involved e-commerce as we are dealing with it now. So I tell people, let's go back and look at those distribution agreements and see where we can really tighten them up going forward. The problem is when you have products that are already out there in the gray market, it's really, really hard to control. And the problem isn't just these penny repricers that devalue the brand. The brand owner doesn't know where these products are going. We don't know if it's sitting in someone's, garage for 6 months, right? We don't know if it could be contaminated. So, as buyers, we need to be very cautious about where we're getting our products. Obviously, we want to try to get it from as close to the brand owner as possible, but of course that's not always feasible, and that's not the way real life works, unfortunately. So
I guess the days of the authorized reseller has kind of gone away. Years ago, Sony and Zenith, they could control their brand and the companies that were authorized to resell.
And you used to have a license. And now to resell, like a resell license, it seems that has been thrown out the window also. Like no one seems to care, and that doesn't seem to be around. But I guess the question is, with this email, like really, it's just kind of what I'm getting from it. Neil had developed products for this company and in their for them, and they were distributing these products. So that's why he received this email. But really, I mean, what type of real claim do they have? I mean, is it more just kind of to put it out there? Because how do they know who's selling or what, and what authority do they really have at this point?
And what makes it worse, Susie, is, these companies also, let's say it's last year's model, and then they sell it off to one of those overstock companies, and that overstock company sells it to another venue that's going to sell it. How are they going to track it?
It's almost impossible to track. And like I said, like once it gets to that point, it's kind of in the gray market. And a lot of people will argue that there's the first sell doctrine and all of these positions that there's really not a lot that can be done at that point with that product. Now, one thing that sellers can think about doing, or brand owners, and I should distinguish that because you can have your third-party resellers and then your brand owners. But one thing that a brand owner can consider doing is having some type of warranty associated with the product. Now, because that warranty might not apply, right, as the product goes down the distribution channels, or if it gets into the gray market. So that's something that sellers or brand owners can consider, is having that warranty associated with the product. People will pay will often pay a premium or a little more to actually get that product with the warranty associated with it. So that's, a lot of this comes down to kind of educating the consumer. And when you have something like Amazon, it's really hard to educate the consumer. It's really hard to pull them off of Amazon and say, hey, come look at my e-commerce site where I'm actually selling the product directly or only through authorized distribution channels. And that comes down to just trying to educate the public to pull them, I shouldn't say this, but a little more away from, buying from these third-party sellers on Amazon who are holding product that's gone through 4 different, transactions. So, educate the consumer, try to get them onto your own platform, try to have your own newsletter. Obviously, a lot of people who are buying on Amazon are not your customer, even though you're the brand owner, but get them onto your e-commerce site, educate them about proper distribution channels and where they should be getting the product if they can't get it directly from you. You can even go so far as listing your warranty on your website, which I think is really good. Or I've even seen some brand owners listing unauthorized sellers on their site, saying these people are not authorized to sell our products, and straight up calling them out. So So I think
that's what the letter is trying to do. The thing, however, these are products that have been in the marketplace for years. They've been on Amazon, on other online sites, in retail stores, and I guess they are just kind of seeing that trickle effect that they just want it stopped. So this letter came out. But really, I think at this point, the letter really is meaningless in a sense, even though it does state, hey, we don't want you selling anymore there. You have X amount of time to get off of Amazon. I mean, but what if
I've shipped 5,000 units?
There's nothing they're going to be able to do.
Into Amazon's warehouse.
The only thing they could do is, which I don't think that they have done, is to protect themselves when they're selling on Amazon too. So everyone's on their listing is what I'm thinking. And so what's happened is there was never anything on there to protect themselves anyway. So they can't kick people off.
Right. So my suggestion in this situation, I'm kind of into money and energy. I mean, money is currency, right? Energy has a current. I suggest people putting their money and energy into correcting the problem going forward, because a lot of times that product is out there and there's really not a lot you can do. And you're going to be sitting there playing whack-a-mole, going crazy, putting your money towards this negative issue that's already out there. My suggestion would be to revisit those distribution agreements going forward and making sure that they're tight. And yes, this could also mean limiting your distributorship, maybe only having 2 or 3. The problem is when people drafted this was, e-commerce has changed so much in just the last 2 or 3 years, right? So go back and revisit those distribution agreements and figure out how you can tighten them up going forward. And in some situations, it may mean cutting off a particular distributor. You have got to have control over your brand, and you might have to limit your distribution system and obviously monitor it. This is not something that's going to be corrected overnight. There's not like a silver bullet to this. This is kind of this is the problem with e-commerce, but at the same time, it can be a blessing. So
Right, and look at it just like, on the retail side of it. So a lot of, what we do as far as getting products into retail and that we help clients with, one of the things is just like we said in the contracts, with contracts your contract needs to be revised, or if you haven't, you're new to getting into retail, to make sure this is included. It's just like when you're hiring sales reps or you're hiring within an area, right? They don't cross over areas. They know what their boundaries are. And the same thing has to be when you're with products too. What's those distribution channels and what are the boundaries? Who's allowed on online sites and what online sites, and who's allowed doing what. And then, but it's very different, like you said, years ago. So those are great great tips. Another thing is, I mean, it's arbitrage. It's, you know, that was the way people did business years ago. That's not the way business is now or moving forward. You know, the great thing is private labeling is not new. It's not a new process. It's just new because all of a sudden everyone's now understanding it or learning.
Democratized, right? People can access it. It doesn't seem like this fairy tale kind of thing. With e-commerce now, a lot of people can get into private label.
Right. And it's not that it's new, it's old. I mean, look at Neil's been doing it for 3 decades. Looks great, right? I mean, his father was doing it for over 60 years.
Not a day over 21.
But right, so it's been around for a long time, but no one's really known how to use it. A lot of people still don't know how to use it.
Arbitrage is just not scalable, and especially when you think about Amazon. I think I read somewhere, and you all probably know more than I do, but they take like 30-something% of the fees.
Sometimes
just Amazon.
But it is a place you have to be because it's a great place to advertise your business or people to learn about your brands. But you have to think beyond Amazon. You have to be private labeling if you want to develop and strengthen your business and your brand in a scalable way, absolutely. But you have to think beyond that. So if you're just private labeling products to get up on Amazon, it's going to be really tough. You have to think beyond that. That's our journey for the last, almost 4 decades now, right? You have to be beyond that. You have to go into the other areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Amazon customers are not your customers. You can't say on an Amazon listing, don't buy from Billy Bob, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You cannot, but you can put that on your own e-commerce site. So the goal is develop a strong brand, develop a strong product, and ultimately have those people love your product so much, even if they're buying it on Amazon, that they end up over on your e-commerce site and they end up on your mailing list and they become your customer, not just Amazon's.
And the problem has been for years, for centuries, that distributors and wholesalers have basically told retailers, you have to have our brand, you have to have our brand. And retailers still to this day, they just don't understand, have your own brand. If you're working with distributors and wholesalers, that's great if you want to have some token amounts of other brands. But the whole idea of being in business should be to sell your brand, to establish your presence in the marketplace. So when people are coming in,
that's what I think this email is about. The email is because these are retailers that are scared because they never did private label. They rely on other brands, right? And now, yes, when you rely on other brands, why should I come into your store when I can go to Amazon or somewhere else? So how do you differentiate yourself? It's exactly what Neil said. And that is our toughest thing is to educate even the retailers, even the biggest retailers that we work with, to actually see that. I think they're starting to see that, but this has been something that we've been trying to work with them, and a lot of them that we have worked with this have been very successful. So follow that pattern. They're the influencers. They're the leaders in the industry. That's how they've done it. Okay. So any tips that you can share, or do you want to just, Susie, maybe just kind of do an overview of the tips, and we're going to wrap it up, the private label newsroom today. Susie.
Yeah. So my 2 biggest tips would be, if you are already a brand owner, go back and look at all your agreements, like all your distribution agreements, and see what it says in there about e-commerce. If it says anything about e-commerce, and it might not. It kind of depends on how old it is. So you might need to really think about how you're going to kind of pull yourself away from that contract. Maybe, I'm not saying to breach the contract by any means, but figure out how you can work with a particular distributor going forward. And maybe you need to narrow down the number of distributors that you're working with. And then my second tip is, if you are just kind of starting this process of private label, like, be sure to not just get a really solid product. Obviously, it's really important, but select a really strong brand, or create a really strong brand name so that you really stand out amongst everything that's out there. And I think that kind of goes to what Neil was saying a minute ago. You have to be unique, and you really have to stand out. And it's not just about pushing products. It's about developing that brand recognition in the marketplace and getting people to look at your products and your brand, and at the end of the day, making them smile. So they'll keep coming back and not forget about you.
But obviously, when they're seeking and establishing that brand, to seek legal advice so they're not, infringing on anything.
And if you get an email like Neil did, with, in a sense, a threat that we want you off because you're affecting our sales, speak to your lawyer.
Speak to your lawyer. Your lawyer can help you.
Private label lawyer.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are signing off.
Thank you for joining the Private Label Newsroom with Karen and Neil Gortzman of the Private Label University and Susie Hickson of the Private Label Law Boutique, the only podcast that gives you up-to-date private label news that will help you grow your private label business. Visit us over on Facebook, leave us a message, and we'll answer your question on the show. Thanks for joining us. We're now signing off.